Right in front of me, dead in front of me. Yeah, between me and the structure. Because the structure was maybe like 7 feet in front of me when I took a step or two, and something blasted me with sound. And yeah, it was big and it was close, but I couldn't see it.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
The color just drains from her face. And I'm kind of stumped because I could tell that something is truly shocking her right now, but I have no idea what the deer in headlights kind of turned into almost like a panic.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. And from this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, you know? And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward, and I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to Pennsylvania to talk with Katrina. Katrina, how are things going in Pennsylvania tonight?
Really exciting. I'm looking forward to telling you about some of those things.
I'm super excited to have you on the line tonight. Thanks so much for calling in. Katrina, what I like to do at the start of every show is I will spend about 1 minute right now, if it's okay with you, kind of just giving you the bumpers on the bowling alley for how I do things.
That sounds great.
Cool. Thanks for that opportunity. The first thing that I like to make sure everyone understands, and that's for you and for anyone dropping in here the first time, because you never know who's dropping by. The emphasis in the show is not about convincing me of anything, or convincing anybody of anything for that matter. I believe you, and because I've been initiated into the strange nature of reality, I know that these events can sometimes defy explanation. And so, having that emphasis to convince detracts from really getting into the details of the story a lot of the time. So just know that you're in friendly company, and it's not a gotcha moment kind of show.
Thank you.
The other thing to say is it's brave to come on the show. I mean, talking about paranormal subject matter, talking about encounters with cryptids, talking about ghosts, fairies, all this stuff can bring with it a type of stigma. And, I do keep everyone anonymous who comes on the show, But notwithstanding, it's still nerve-wracking to do it. And I've told my story a number of times in a public or more public setting. So I know it takes bravery to come on the show, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that right here at the top.
Okay. I don't feel like it takes much courage. I feel like it's becoming more mainstream to talk about these things, and that we all need to share our experiences so that when something unusual happens to somebody, like you were sharing with me before our interview, they need to be able to find that somebody else has experienced that too.
That's a huge part of why I do this show, and that was spoken like a true brave person. Well done. The final thing I say at the start of the show is, for maximum comfort for the guest, I like to just sort of kick back and let you have a lot of time and space. I'm interested in most aspects of what has occurred, up to and including who I'm talking to. So feel free to ease myself and the audience into things. Like, let me know what kind of interest you might have had in the subject matter that you're about to delve into beforehand. Tell me a little bit about yourself, that sort of stuff. And then just as you feel comfortable, what were you doing that day, and walk us into the event. When you're done, I'll ask questions, when you're naturally finished your storytelling. I'll not leave you hanging there at all, and we'll pretty much take it from there, which, makes it the format of the show.
Sounds great.
It's funny. It's been a couple months since I've laid down new episodes, and I recognize I was a little rusty on the handoff there, but we'll do it. We'll do our best.
No, it sounds great.
Well, thanks for that grace as I fumble with a unusual, fumbled handoff to the guest. Usually I'm pretty good at this part. What I'll say here is this, is if you'd be so kind, and you can sort of walk us into that would be really greatly appreciated.
Sure. So first of all, I thank you for having me on your show. I've listened to some of your other interviews, and I can tell that you're a safe place to share some of the stories I'd like to talk about today. And like we were talking about before the interview, I love that you're providing a place for people to come when they've had an unusual experience, and to hear that others have also experienced something, because it does change you when something that you can't explain occurs. And it's comforting to know that other people have felt that too. So that being said, I grew up in the 1970s in New Jersey. And at that time, there were some Bigfoot sightings that were being reported in the newspapers. And it was when they just started using that term Bigfoot. And my dad was kind of interested in things like this. And he would clip out the articles and read them to me. And we were in the woods a lot. And he would tease me when we were in the woods. Oh, watch out, Bigfoot might be over that way. Oh, do you smell any rotten eggs? And it was always kind of a game between us, but I think we both believed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So fast forward through many decades, I had a very unusual experience last weekend that I do want to tell you about, that I do think involved Bigfoot. But before I get into that, would it be okay if I told you about an experience that I also think was Bigfoot related a few years ago, also in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, starting back chronologically is a great way to approach it. Please do that. That would be great.
And then if we have time, and if you feel like your listeners would still be interested, I was living in Key West, Florida for a few years, and I gave ghost tours, and I had some very unusual paranormal activity inside a certain building in Key West. And I also lived in a house where I believe the original owner was still very much present and performed some poltergeist activity. So prompt me at the end if you still want to hear those stories, okay?
Oh, we're going to make time for all of that tonight. I'm locked in. No rush at all.
Well, you're being very generous. Thank you so much. So, as I said, I lived in Key West, and I decided to come back to Pennsylvania after I was there a few years. But I needed some transitional housing because I just wasn't sure exactly what town I wanted to come back to. My family's not here except for my adult children. So it wasn't like I had a family home to go back to. I had to find my own apartment. So I stayed at an Airbnb in Lancaster County, and it was a beautiful property. It was built about 15 years ago. It's a 3,500 square foot home, and it's built right below a ridge line that goes up a hill for about a mile. And the house itself is 700 feet up off the road, straight up a hill. And there are two homes between it and the road. So pretty secluded, and 10 acres of woods all behind it. So I fell in love with it because I love the woods. And I stayed for a couple months and started looking for an apartment. And there were some other people lodging there as well, long term. And the woman that owned it, kind of, my grandmother would have called her a tough cookie. You know, she was kind of a cranky older woman. And I don't know, I never felt at peace inside the house. And I always thought it was sort of her demeanor that kept it from being a peaceful environment. And she left for Florida for 2 months, the last 2 months I was there. And there were still other people there. And I felt comfortable. I felt safe. I liked going out, you know, outside and enjoying a little bit of the woods and so forth. And then those two people left, and I was alone in this rather secluded, really large home. And I started to feel like I was being watched. And I couldn't imagine who would be all the way back in that area. And it was January. So it's not like people, you know, like some homeless person or somebody was lurking around the house looking in windows. And the way the house was built, you know, the main level was up off the ground. So anything watching me would have been really big and tall. And, you know, I just chalked it up to being nervous about being alone in a big home. And one night I was woken up out of a dead sleep because something banged on the house on the other side of where my bed was. And this is an enormous house, very solidly built, not like a cabin in the woods. So for something to bang on the side of the house loud enough to wake me up out of a dead sleep, I don't even know what that would be. So I was kind of on edge. And the next day I noticed that when the sun went down, the hair on my arms was up, the hair on the back of my neck was up, and I'm like, what am I reacting to? So I'm a Christian woman. You know, I started praying throughout the house. I put on praise and worship music on the TVs around the house, and I put on some extra lights. And then I called some friends and I said, would you pray for me? I'm alone in this house tonight and I don't feel safe. And the more I prayed and the more I was prayed for, the more afraid I became. And that doesn't really make sense, right? I got through the night and I just felt very uncomfortable the next day. So the woman that had left, her daughter, who was in her 40s and had grown up on the property, she lived nearby and she was kind of, you know, looking in as a caretaker. And I called her on the phone and I said, does your mother have any enemies? Because I feel like there's somebody hanging around this house at night watching me. And I don't feel safe. I feel afraid. And I'm not a fearful person, not at all. And the woods are my comfort zone. So this house that backs up to the woods, I shouldn't feel afraid at all. And the daughter was there with her husband on the other end of the phone, and she's talking to me a little bit. And I hear him saying something in the background, and she's shushing him. And then I hear him say, tell her about the Yeti. I said, did he just say Yeti? And she said, yeah. She said, when I grew up, we didn't have the house on the property yet. We were living in a trailer until we built the house. And she said 30 years earlier, when she was 10 years old, she had been sleeping outside on the front deck with her brother and woke up in the middle of the night and there was a Bigfoot standing over them. and they ran into the house, and they talked about it in the morning and then didn't talk about it for a very long time. So she said, I was just figured that there's one lurking around somewhere, but I never thought to tell anybody. And I said, well, believe it or not, that's kind of what I was thinking might be bothering me. So the next night was worse, and I knew I couldn't stay anymore. So I moved out the next day.
So interesting. So it's interesting too, just the way that you describe the house's build as being up and off. I do believe that human beings inherently possess the ability to know when they're being watched. I think
yes.
That's a real skill set we possess.
Yes.
And I think each of us distinctly knows that feeling.
And here's the thing. I went out the next morning looking for evidence. I'm like, something kept me up half the night, scared to death. And I'm not a fearful person. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. I did see something that could have been a footprint underneath the window. I'll never know for sure because it wasn't firmly outlined. And there's still that part of my mind that says, oh, I was stepping around that area, adding food to the bird feeder that's right there. My foot could have slipped. So, the mind wants to fill in things and make them logical.
What do you make of the feeling of fear increasing as you were getting engagement on prayer? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked me about that. My sense at the time, and in talking with some of my friends since, is that something was feeding off of my fear.
It's interesting. Do you think that and not that you know, but do you think that would be the one and the same that was causing the fear?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was a victim of infrasound. I think I was being pushed from the house. And I don't know if it was Bigfoot, but I think there was some kind of entity, maybe even something demonic, that wanted me out of that house for some reason. And maybe while there were other people in the house, I didn't feel it. But when I was alone and more attuned, I was real hypersensitive. But whatever was hanging around wanted me out, was how I felt. So I actually called the landlord 10:30 at night and said, I'm feeling really uncomfortable in the house tonight, and I'm afraid. I don't have a car right now, and your truck is in the garage. Can I just use your pickup and just drive down the road and stay at a hotel? And she said no. She said, I took the insurance off the truck when I came down to Florida for the winter, so no. And I regret to this day that I even called and asked her permission. I think I should have just taken the truck.
Yeah, in life sometimes asking forgiveness is better than asking for permission.
Truly. But who knows what would have happened if I had, opened that garage door and pulled the truck out. I mean, would there have been something in the big driveway that would have wanted to hurt me? I mean, I don't know. There was such a war going on within myself. Should I stay in the house or should I leave? And just to give you an idea of how afraid I was, I holed myself up in my room that I was renting and moved the dresser in front of the door. And I pulled the shades and I put myself in the corner with the Bible on my lap. And I just figured, well, if anything can get in the house, they're going to have to get through that dresser. And I'm going to be climbing out the window before that happens.
A lot is coming up for me as I listen to you. One of the privileges, I guess, that I'm allowed listening to so many people is I feel like I get a really good sense for people when I listen to them the way that I do. You don't strike me as a person who is afraid of anything. I just don't pick that up from you.
No, I'm not. I'm a journalist by trade, and I write about City Hall, and I write about corruption and crime, and I've been a police reporter. I've been in some really dicey situations, and nothing throws me. This scared the shit out of me.
You absolutely remind me of somebody I know who used to be a mortician and coroner, with the ability to just say, like, yeah, that doesn't bother me. I can look at that and be in the presence of that. And it's not that I have no emotions or anything. It's just that I am able to handle it.
Nope, I'm the same way.
Voices are so interesting. I could almost do a separate show on voices because I feel like a person's personality is very reflected in voice.
Sure.
Almost like you could say, like, if you looked at a bunch of pictures and you say these two people look alike, there is absolutely sound alike voices that match like personalities very, very closely. And I'll just leave that hanging out there in the air for further speculation on another show. But
so I want to touch on something else that you had said leading up to the interview, and I had touched on a little bit, was that people, when they have something unusual happen, want to know that other people did too. I called the Bigfoot Research Society in Pennsylvania while all this was going on, and I'm like, could there be a Bigfoot? Could that be what I'm experiencing? Because I was trying to make sense of it, and I was going back to all those stories my dad read me, and I'd always been curious. And they're like, well, who knows? I mean, it could be. Are you alone? And I'm like, yeah, I'm alone. Can they get in the house? Yeah, they can get in the house. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I'm trying to actually visualize if something as big as a Bigfoot could fit in the doorways. That was why I barricaded myself in the bedroom. But in the course of that, I spoke to Timothy Renner in York, Pennsylvania, who's written 20 different books on the paranormal in Lancaster County and the surrounding areas, and started learning more about what other people had experienced. And he's like, yeah, that sounds like it could have been a Bigfoot. So that's why I'm happy to share my story, because I can't say for sure that that's what it was. But I know something really strange happened. And that way, if other people are listening and they've had something strange happen, they know they're not alone.
truly, truly fascinating. I keep coming back to that increasing sense of fear as you were looking for spiritual support and just doing other things to kind of, alleviate your tension.
Well, I think that it was inflaming whatever was surrounding me. That's why I think there was something demonic going on, because I've actually witnessed on 3 different occasions somebody releasing a demonic spirit out of themselves. I belong to a Pentecostal church and been a part of the prayer team praying over somebody when a demonic entity came out of them. And you have to pray a certain way, and the prayer has to be bigger than the demonic. And I had 100 people praying for me. I had tapped into a prayer line online. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't big enough to cast out whatever was around me. But again, I felt like something was feeding off of me. So maybe it was interfering with me as well. I don't know if that's making sense. I'm just saying what I've experienced.
That makes perfect sense. You're fascinating to talk to because there's often, I think, hold on, let me just collect my thoughts because I want to say this correctly. It's something I always wrestle with, this particular one. Sometimes there's this like tendency to feel like a Christian fundamental belief system is in direct opposition to the allowance for the existence of things like Bigfoots or fairies or etc.
Yep. I agree. And all I can say is I'm a spiritual person. I love the Lord Jesus Christ. He is my Lord and Savior. But I think it's my spiritual nature that allows me to have a relationship with Jesus and to know the Holy Spirit and to also pray over people and understand that they've got a demonic entity and it's got to be released. So it's the spiritualness in me that allows for all of that.
I want to make sure that you don't misunderstand my statement there, because I'm trying to offer a real compliment and an acknowledgement of something that I always kind of have as a pet peeve, which is I think that people discount religious types when it comes to paranormal subject matter, because there's kind of like this feeling like, oh, the paranormal truths are the truths and everything else has been a big lie keeping us from those truths. I don't think they're separate at all. I think that what you're talking about, it mirrors what I actually think the real structure of the world is, which is it's a both physical and spiritual plane in which the forces of good and evil are constantly in battle.
Yep. I agree. I think my minister would too. I mean, he's real open-minded, you know?
And for that matter, I mean, probably part of the problem is that in certain sections of Christian faith, there's a tendency to say if it is not Jesus and God, you know, in and of itself, it's demonic. If it's anything outside of that, it's a false idol, it's demonic. And that may well be true. I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think that archetypal spiritual powers like the Lord Jesus Christ are absolutely real and may even have total dominion over all that is.
Let's hope.
You know, you know what? And I allow for that with no prejudice whatsoever.
Yeah.
At the same time, it may be that it is a little bit more nuanced, and that in addition to creating human souls and animals and plants and all other aspects of life as we know it, the Lord saw it fit to create a class of entities that we are talking about, both good, you know, helpful little entities that maybe are charged with supporting nature or supporting parties, for example. And at the same time, you know, the devil being allowed for could also be responsible for an equal class of entities.
That's what I think is it's good versus evil. So along those lines, here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, there's a very large Amish population. And I did some research and I came across some information in local Facebook chats about years ago. I don't know how long, like let's go back 10 or 15 years maybe. A few of the local Amish farms were having trouble with something big with hands coming onto their farms and stealing chickens and livestock. And there was a report from somebody that, you know, had a relationship with these people that had this one particular Amish farm, that said the farmer came out and found his chickens gone with only their heads left scattered around. No blood, just chicken heads laying around and the chickens themselves gone. And they saw footprints, and whatever word they used for Bigfoot, they indicated that that's probably what it was. And they allowed the family that owned that farm to relocate because whatever it was, they didn't feel they could stop. But this is the important part. The Amish refuse to speak of it because they feel that Bigfoot is a demon. And if you speak of him, you will summon him.
A lot of people share that perspective. Again, not to just breeze past it, but you're deeply fascinating to talk to outside of just the stories, because it's rare that I'll get an opportunity to talk to somebody who's in possession of this nuanced mindset. So you're really cool. I appreciate you a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. I really mean that, actually. It gives me a lot of opportunity to ask questions that I've been wrestling with.
Please.
So, okay, let's I don't really have any more questions about this initial one, but other than just to say again, your great storytelling is affording a lot of introspection and thoughtfulness here. So we're off to a great start. That's the whole point of the show, is to get everybody thinking. And not that I'm an expert or you're an expert, so we're in safe company with one another.
No, we're all trying to figure it out. Would you like to hear about what happened last weekend?
Yeah, so let's tie the two Bigfoot stories together, and then we'll jump around and go back to this ghost tour stuff and anything else that seems relevant. So
it all comes back to my lifelong interest in and belief in Bigfoot. It just always made sense to me that he was out there. So fast forward to last weekend, I was in Chester County, Pennsylvania, about an hour from here. And while I was there, I remembered that there was a local park that I hadn't been to in a number of years. And I love walking in the woods, and I never feel afraid. I'm usually by myself. I've never had any bad experiences. I carry mace because I'm only afraid of two things in the woods: crazy humans or crazy animals. Like a rabid raccoon coming out of nowhere, or some crazy guy lurking behind a tree. So that's just sensible, right? Uh, but I did go with a girlfriend this time because we were having lunch together, and I said to her, the last time I was at this park, I saw some really interesting structures. And at the time, I thought they were lean-tos. And I thought that they were built by maybe some Boy Scouts coming in and, doing something or camping. But since I've started looking deeper into the Bigfoot phenomenon, I've started to wonder if maybe there's a Bigfoot presence there. So she was open-minded. We used to go to church together. I mean, she's got a, very open mind. So she said, well, I'll go with you. This is a former farm that's been turned into a park. It's 85 acres, and a conservancy land group bought it up, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And if you want to sort of picture it, like I said, it's a farm. If you're looking at it from a bird's eye view and you break it into quadrants, 3 of the quadrants are just big pastures and take up probably half the acreage. And the conservancy group has mowed a path around the perimeter and then one path diagonally across each of the pastures. So they're big meadows. The woods are all the way at the end and back up on one side to a housing development. And on another side, there's a pipeline that runs through them down into the state of Delaware. But once you're in the woods, I mean, you're a mile from the parking lot and you're in some dense woods. This is mature growth, big beech trees, some saplings. But I mean, there's daylight coming through, but it's a dense set of woods. And again, I felt quite at ease. And my friend that was with me, she grew up in Connecticut. She played in the woods growing up. She's like me, like this is the place for rest. So we were enjoying our walk, and I don't know, we were probably walking 10 or 15 minutes before I did see a structure. And I pointed it out to her and I said, see, this is what I was talking about. And what it was some of the really young saplings that are starting to grow up this spring had been brought together at the top in a circle about maybe 6 feet across, and it looked like an igloo. It was that shape, about that size. And I pointed it out to my friend and I said, see, I really think that this was built by something with hands that had a reason to create a little bit of shelter in the woods. I mean, maybe it was a hiker, just wanting to come and sit under some tree branches. I don't know, trying to make sense of it. But we walked about another half mile and saw a very similar structure. This one was bigger, about 8 feet in diameter and about 10 feet off the trail. And she said to me, look at all the undergrowth. It's all flattened down. It looks like somebody's been sleeping there. And while she's talking to me, I'm taking one step forward off the trail, closer to the structure, because I want to get a closer look. And that is when something very big and very close to me growled. And then it huffed. So the sound was like, whoa, ho, ho. It almost sounded like a bull. And I took a step back right away and I looked at my friend. I said, did something just growl? And she said, I don't know. And that's when I realized I felt it in my chest and the hair on my arms had gone up. I said, let's keep walking. So we walked a distance away and I turned to her and I said, what was that? She said, I don't know what I heard. She said, I felt something. I said, I know I did too. She said, but I was talking to you while you were moving forward and then you stopped. I said, yeah, because something growled at me and made this huffing sound. And it was clear that I was not meant to get any closer to that structure. So I took a couple steps back. So we talked about it more in the car, and she's not quite as open to the idea of Bigfoot as I am. But I can't imagine what else it would have been.
Where did you feel the sound coming from?
Right in front of me, dead in front of me. Yeah, between me and the structure. Because the structure would never set foot in the woods again.
Can I offer you my take on
Absolutely.
the Bigfoot thing?
Yeah.
So, I've talked about this maybe once or twice on the show. It's not something I traditionally put emphasis on because my focus here is on collecting fairy stories. But I do think that Bigfoot is a type of fae, in the sense that when I use the word fae or fairy, I'm referring to not a fantasy thing. I'm referring, first of all, to a real thing, much like Bigfoot I'm referring to as a real thing. This is not a fantasy thing. There's a huge distinction that needs to be made between fantasy, which is, for example, stuff you see in movies like Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
and reality, which
Right.
is, in fact, not much dissimilar to a Lord of the Rings fantasy depiction, but is very real. And so, getting your head around the fact that the world is kind of a place where spirit is animated and does what it does, which is kind of what we're talking about, these various manifestations of spirit, be it Bigfoot, be it, religious archetypes, fallen angels, gods, demons, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different ways that throughout history people have tried to give names to these entity classes that are not necessarily tangible but are definitely real. So I've seen a Bigfoot myself back in the
Wow.
Pacific Northwest, and I've talked about that in a limited fashion because, again, I'm not trying to, I guess, to complete my thought, having seen that Bigfoot, having seen what I initially saw in 2019, having seen some things here in Costa Rica subsequently, which is also added to my Rolodex of visual sightings with what I feel are these entity classes, I'm of the perspective that Bigfoot is a type of fae because it possesses many or all of the characteristics that I also tangle with in the fairy phenomenon. Being invisible is breaking physics. That's not how physics work, right? To our knowledge,
Right,
anyhow. So when I told you about the fairy coming through the glass that I saw, I mean, it's
Yeah.
no different to me that task being performed by the fairy I saw or Bigfoot being invisible, for example, right? One entity might have one particular trick up its sleeve, like going through objects, which is fairies can definitely go through walls and definitely take objects out of places and put objects back into places that are secure. So that's a fairy skill, for example. Bigfoot may well be much more rooted to earth, but may also have a type of skill that, involves being able to not be seen. I think both of these things are explainable with quantum physics. I think that much like the European robin has been recently proven to be looking at the quantum entanglement of electrons with its eye, which is previously thought to be impossible that a living organism could perform a quantum physics experiment inside its body. Not only does the robin pull it off, it's using it to see on days where there's inclement weather, and it does it perfectly. So if the lowly robin can look at the quantum plane, see the action within the quantum plane, and use it to make real world decisions to its benefit, it is not a huge leap for me anyway to consider a entity that is alive like a human being or like a Bigfoot being able to enact their quantum biology in a way that produces perhaps invisibility, or in the case of humans, you hear many stories of these gurus of old teleporting themselves or levitating or moving objects with their mind. Like, all of this may fall under the umbrella of a rational quantum phenomenon, the explanation of which sort of starts at the idea of quantum physics itself and its many tropes, like spooky action at a distance, or quantum entanglement, which is really just saying that like stuff that is not physically connected reacts to one another at huge distances. How is that possible? And that idea is not intangible. That's proven. A good example would be just like sunlight hitting a plant leaf. Not to get too far off the weeds here. We're still talking about Bigfoot. We're still talking about Bigfoot, but the photon of light is simultaneously existing in multiple positions at once within the leaf, which is the only way that the speed of photosynthesis is explainable. And so the idea of quantum superpositioning, or a single thing being multiple places at once, is inherent in light, and light, is the source for basically everything taking place here, from our vision down to all life itself. And that very substrate, that very stuff, light itself, is a quantum miracle. So everything that flows down from it possesses that same quantum capability. And you could even go so far, to kind of dovetail really beautifully with what you believe, is to see that the sun itself is the source of life, and it was created, and that's why it's magical, and everything that lives under that sun is imbued with that magic. So yes, I do think that Bigfoot can become invisible, and the way that the one I saw moved was so fucking fast. It was like on a railroad track. It was ultra smooth, ultra fast, too fast for normal. And I saw a fairy move in more or less the same way. I call the movement like uncanny valley. It's too smooth, too precise, too fast. And I saw that 4 separate times now. I've seen a visual that I absolutely believe falls under the classification of Fae. They all move that exact same way. It's not quite jerky, but it is a little bit jerky, and but it's also at the same time extremely precise and uncanny. So that's my take. Anyway, that's a whole lot of blab from me.
You're the fascinating one at the moment.
You just got me thinking so much, because like what I really want to ask is, I want to just like turf the Bigfoot stuff for a quick second. Yeah. Tell me about praying over people to release demons from them as a Pentecostal practice. Like what was, tell me about one of them if you're open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. About 2 years ago, when I was still in Key West, Florida, there was a Bible study at church on a Wednesday night where the pastor preaches, but it's more like he focuses on one passage that he's teaching on. And just as he was wrapping up and about to dismiss church, his daughter-in-law literally ran into the church holding her cell phone and ran right up to the altar and handed it to him, interrupted him, and said, "You got to take this call." And I've been going to church since I was born. I have never seen somebody rush the altar and hand a phone to the minister saying, "You have to take this call." Never happened. And he looked a little taken aback, but he took the call, and he was saying some very interesting things. What hospital? Okay. Yes, okay, we will be there. And it was clear that something very significant had just happened. He hung up the phone and he turned to the congregation. It was a very small group that night. There might have only been 20 of us. And he said, there's a member of our church who's at the local hospital. It's believed that she has a demonic attachment, and I need one man and one woman to go with me. And my hand shot up in the air. I just knew I was supposed to go. And then another gentleman went, and on the way to the hospital, which was only about 2 miles away, the minister said that he was praying while he was driving and asking the Lord to reveal to him the name of the demon, because he had learned doing this previously that you have to call the demon out by name. So he said, okay, I know what demon it is. So we prayed together. We got to the hospital. We went in, and the man that knew Pastor that had called him to say, you need to come see this girl, took us back. And in one of the exam rooms was a teenager that I recognized from church. She was about 16 or 17. And she was looking a little scared, a little uncertain. She knew us, I had talked to her a few times. I mean, obviously, she knew the minister and maybe the other gentleman. And, we walked in, and the medical personnel were kind of milling around. They thought that she was having a psychiatric breakdown. And they were busy trying to get a room for her at the local psych hospital. And Pastor was having a much different idea about what was really going on. So there were kind of brief hellos, and then he asked her, so what's going on? And she just said that she had been brought to the hospital. She really didn't seem clear on how she got there or what happened. Her mother wasn't there. She was there by herself. So we were kind of uncertain about that. Like maybe they had had an argument or something. And he asked her if she had taken any drugs, if she had had anything to drink, or if she had, smoked anything. She said, no. So he said, well, we're going to pray for you. And the gentleman that was with us was wearing a very large cross. And just as Pastor put his hand on her shoulder, and she looked directly at that cross, and in a voice I've never heard come out of a 16 or 17-year-old girl, she screamed at the man and at Pastor. And I don't want to say exactly what she said. It was pretty awful. But in a very deep voice, she said, F you, you MFers, I'm going to kill you both. And it wasn't her voice, and it wasn't her. Something in that instant had completely taken her over. And that was when Pastor really went into, deep prayer with myself and the gentleman, praying over the situation. And he called the demon by name and said, come out of that girl. He said, I dealt with you before, demon, in another person, another place. I didn't send you to the lake of fire. I'm sending you to the lake of fire right now. We're done. And by now the girl's on the floor. She's thrashing around. We had the door closed, but the medical personnel were starting to look in like, what's going on in there? And then it stopped. And we all took a step back and realized something had been released. It wasn't something you could see. It was a feeling that the commotion was done. And she sat up and she looked at us, and we helped her up and we sat her on the exam table, and she had no idea what had just happened. It was like she came to, and Pastor started explaining to her that she had had a possession and that he had released it. And about that time, her mom walked in and we had to explain to her mom. So it turns out that they were originally from Haiti, and they were practicing voodoo in their home. And it was Pastor's sense that they had opened up something, and that whatever came through made itself at home in the girl. And she was at church a couple of days later, right as rain. She's had no problems since. I've been in touch with her mom. That girl would have been in the psych hospital, and she'd still be in the psych hospital. So that's the story.
You're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really mean that, Katrina. Somehow, as strange as it may sound at first pass, fundamentalist religious beliefs, Bigfoot, demonic possessions, fairies, our true nature of our souls, all of this is related subject matter, in my opinion, because it all is speaking to the unseen true nature of reality. If a pastor is aware that a demon exists and is this confident in the next steps to take, that's a high authority. That's a high authority for the existence of that entity, right? And if a demon can exist, then absolutely a fairy can exist, and absolutely a Bigfoot can exist. It's all, it's interesting.
No, I think all of this is interesting because we want to make sense of things that happen that don't make any sense. So that's why we talk about it. And I do want to be clear that with the demonic possession that I witnessed, Pastor was simply an agent of change, right? He was a conduit. He called on the Holy Spirit to pull that demon out of that girl. It wasn't by his power. So I want to be clear about that it wasn't a human power that did that. And maybe now we're circling back to good and evil. Good's got to overcome evil. There was something evil taking over this girl, but it was the good, it was the light that pulled it out of her.
Yeah, thank you for making that distinction. And my apologies if it's me that misspoke.
No, not at all.
Truly did understand that he was calling upon the Holy Spirit in that moment.
I just hadn't said it for your listeners.
You know what? It's a good distinction to make for that reason. My observation, just that he, as pastor, which is a trusted position in the community, having this be the course of action that he is determining is correct, is in and of itself fascinating.
It was incredible. It was incredible to witness what happened. And the girl is now in college. She's studying something in the medical field related. I think she's studying dental hygiene or something like that. But I mean, I'm just saying she's gone on with her life and she's living like a normal 19-year-old.
I sincerely do wonder, not just based on your story, but it has occurred to me at other times to wonder how many people experiencing mental illness are experiencing this type of thing.
I know. And you know what? I sometimes wonder if these psych hospitals, almost like if they're full of people that we might call broken, are those people almost like portals in and of themselves that attract something? Or is it in that setting? Or did they go in with it? And there's a lot to unpack there.
There's so much to unpack there, and not to veer all over the map, but this is just a really fascinating conversation with you. I meant it off the start when I said, oh, this is going to be a good one, because you've got my mind really working here. And although we have differing places that we're coming from, I think we really understand each other. So I'm going to offer something here about my friend DK, who's, if you've listened to the show, his music is at the end. So my friend, he took his own life coming up on 11 years ago.
I have a friend who lost her son the same way. A friend said to her, he ascended of his own way. He ascended in his own way, or he ascended of his own will. But it was like a different way to frame, he took his own life. No, he ascended of his own will.
Fair. And I mean...
a different way to view it, a different framework.
Words have power. Someone pointed out to me once, which seems so obvious when they said it to me. They said, like a witch casts a spell. Right. And I said, yeah. And then... And
Pastor pulled that demon out of that girl by the power of the Holy Spirit because he spoke it.
Yeah, and someone said they call it spelling for a reason
Yep.
in relation to like
Yep.
how you create words, and I said, "Oh, yeah, words really matter." And the word spelling is actually
Yep.
talking about the act of casting spells, which really means words like literally are spells. All words, every word matters. Someone on the show, has offered up the idea that thoughts are things,
Yeah.
and that may well be absolutely true as well. But just back to DK for a second, because we are talking about these, what sound like effectively exorcisms or demonic kicking a demon out. And so again, this subject matter is all related in my mind. So sometimes articulating my thoughts can be a little difficult in the moment. I'm going to try my best here. So I talk about on the show that having a paranormal experience of any type is a type of liability. That's why I start the show by saying it's brave to come on.
Right.
Part of that bravery is the internal fortitude to just tackle it. Not everybody is lucky enough to be strong like you are. A lot of people, in the face of unusual events, may find themselves, without a foundation, because of the change that's occurred in their perception of the world. And again, going back to my own encounter in 2019, which I thought was a love-filled, light-filled, extremely positive event, I'm going to go with, I'm pretty sure my friend DK was having or had very similar visual and auditory encounters with entities from the other side. Because what was going on for him was he was becoming quite elated, and truly this was a person doing great work, at a high level in environmental activism, lots of success in music, lots of success in public speaking and engagement. He was touring around, presenting to schools, going on the news. This was a guy who was achieving his objectives and his dreams. And at the same time was able to do those things because he was being encouraged from a place that others couldn't necessarily see or understand. He was always visionary. He was always like, we can fix it, we can do better. This is our world, like we're here to be stewards of it. And he seemed to understand the possibility of change and the need for change very, very, very deeply. And in his music towards the end and in his life towards the end, he was writing a lot about and talking a lot about the true magical nature of the world. I think he was using a lot of metaphor, but he was, in my opinion, and based on the personal conversations I had with him, which allowed me to make this analysis, he was experiencing and seeing a lot of the same stuff that the people that I talk to on the show are experiencing. And a lot of the time it is magical, like objects appearing and disappearing and reappearing, or, visual sightings like I had. But at the same time, it is psychologically damaging somehow to be separated from the pack, to think of the world in terms of good and evil forces being real, not just conceptual, to then start to interpret the events in your day as potentially being influenced by good or evil forces. It can get to be a slippery slope. To allow for the existence of fairies or Bigfoot or demons like you're talking about, or even God itself, can be something that is like hard to know for sure and hard to make sense of. But in the case of fairies, because it's sort of like a isolated community, not like a religious community like you're fortunate enough to be part of, that has a real foundation, real institutions, and real community. If you see like a weird cryptid or a fairy, you're kind of cast astray all of a sudden, and you're like, oh fuck, where do I fit in?
That's a very good point.
Anyway, just to kind of tie a bow on that point, and to relate it back to this exorcism that you're describing, when he took his own life, I never sat right with that for very, very, very long time. I just couldn't see how that was what he did. And I knew that he was wrestling with this stuff, But the man I knew was extremely capable, and I could never reconcile the act of suicide. And not to trigger everybody, but I think it's worth mentioning like how it happened and why it still is hard for me. He lived in an area where there was a waterfall behind his family home, kind of like a park in behind there.
Yeah.
And he would go and meditate in this spot at the top of the waterfall every day after work. And one day he jumped from that position several hundred feet down into the very shallow water below, which the fall did not kill him, but he was incapacitated and was in a shallow pool of water and drowned in 6 inches of water, basically.
Horrible.
I know. And this is not... And I went to the scene of the suicide at the top there. And there's like a large set of bushes that you really would have had to like get a running start to jump over those bushes to make that, to get into the clearing where you're now falling, to clear the ridge. And I just could never understand how he would have had it in him to just make that running swan dive, up and over 5 feet out of bushes to get into the clear. And I felt something in that spot that I never could really articulate this entire time, And as I listen to you talk, I've often wondered, like, was he opening himself up? And in that process, did he encounter a very similar circumstance to the one you're describing with this 16-year-old girl?
Right. Did something whisper in his ear, what would it be like just to jump?
And was that something he was victim to because he was on an ascendant path, creating a lot of good, and therefore was a threat in that conceptual fight between good and evil? And so that's what I'm trying to articulate. As out there as that sounds, I am trying to say, as I listen to you talk, it gives me an opportunity to voice that deep held concern I've always had, which is, did he really mean to do it? Or did he get a situation like with this girl where something came in and forced that outcome?
So I'll give a little perspective here if I can. When I was a police reporter at a daily newspaper, sadly, there were sometimes suicides that we became aware of in the community, but we couldn't report on them. I mean, that's not something you write an article about. But I did have a conversation with the local coroner about one particular suicide or suspected suicide because it was a college student. And she had been sitting in the window of her dorm, 2 stories up, and fell out, landed down in the quad, and was dead. And I said to him, well, is it a suicide or not? And he said, we don't know. I said, well, you're the coroner. Why don't you know? And he said, because she didn't leave a note. And he said, in my profession, it's my personal rule that if there's no note, it wasn't a suicide. He said, I will never put on the death certificate that it was because I don't want to do that to the family. That was his take on it.
Yeah. In the case of any mental health struggle, I think it's important just at this juncture in this conversation, which has taken kind of a heavy turn, to remind everybody, please stick around until tomorrow and see what tomorrow brings.
Always, always. It's such a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And there's always people that say later, if you had just talked to me, and go to church. Go to church, join a community, be a part of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Join a church is really strong advice, especially one that, feels right to you, whatever that may be.
Well, the other thing about churches like the Pentecostal church that I'm a part of in Key West still, I've often heard that pastor say, church is supposed to be a hospital for the soul. don't stay at home crying in your bedroom. If your whole world's falling apart, come here. Let us pray for you, because this is where things are supposed to be made better, and you're allowed to come while you're falling apart.
I appreciate very much you allowing me to zigzag into so many of my own internal thoughts. I'll go a little further if it's okay with you, because this is all
Sure.
bringing quite a lot up for me. Recently, one of the guests on the show, a gentleman named Clyde, took his own life about 5 weeks ago.
It's so sad.
I know. And he was in a lot of contact with me up until it happened. And very similarly to my friend DK, there's a lot of people around this scenario that are just like, what? Because you're talking about, again, another very articulate, kind, thoughtful, talented man, whom, up until very recently was, functioning normally,
Right.
and I don't want to say too much more, because I am still trying to digest and process the flow of events here. But I have reason to believe anyway that the suicide in his case is also not as it appears potentially.
Right.
And I think that that's interesting that the coroner's take. He might be saying that because he just wants to protect the possibility and not make the assertion, therefore not damage the family if he's wrong.
Well, right. That's it. He didn't want to hurt a family. I mean, that's a very difficult thing to grapple with later, to try to make, peace of. Yeah.
What we're talking about is slightly different, which is that a apparent suicide, which many people might judge as a suicide, may have a underlying cause that is not, and so you said that you were present for other similar demonic exorcisms. Could you tell me about others if you're open to it?
Yeah, and then I'm going to segue into doing ghost tours in Key West, because the commonality there is that if you're going to witness a demonic possession and a release, man, you better have some praying over any openings you might have that could sneak into. You've got to be so careful that something doesn't attach to you. So the other two instances, one was in that church. It was, again, after one of those Wednesday night prayer services. It was a couple years earlier, and I was tired and I just wanted to go home. And I walked past a group of women praying together, and I could tell the woman they were laying hands on and praying for, the way she was keening and making these noises. I'm like, oh my God, they're releasing a demon. I just want to go home. And I got outside and I got as far as my bicycle, because everybody there just rides bicycles around. I couldn't get on the bike. I had to go back in. I'm like, Lord, just leave me alone on this. I just want to go home. Well, that wasn't going to happen, because when you become a follower of Jesus, you do make the commitment to allow the Holy Spirit to work in you and work through you. And I really was being blocked from getting on that bicycle. It was like, you're going back in the church. So I went back in the church, and I had just started going. I really didn't even know these women. And I felt like I was butting into something very personal. But I just kind of went over on the edge and I said, can I pray with you? Sure, sure. And it looked like pastor's wife had about enough praying. I mean, it's very draining to do that kind of heavy prayer. So I laid my hands on this woman and I started just praying over her. I couldn't even hear what the other women were praying. It was a sense of ministering to this woman, when all of a sudden she literally started coughing. And it was almost like she was trying to get something out. And there was great encouragement in prayer as that was happening. And then there was sort of this violent coughing. It was clear that something had come out of her and been released. And then she was just crying and crying. And somehow we all recognized that we then had to fill the void. And we started praying the Holy Spirit into her. And I had some holy oil in my purse. So I anointed her head and I gave her the holy oil. And I said, now that, whatever is clear of you, you need to anoint your doorway before you go in your house. You need to make sure, that there's nothing in your house, right? Um, so she didn't even look like the same person when I saw her the next Sunday. I went up to her, I asked her how she was doing. She said, were you one of the women that was praying over me? I said, yes. And whatever had left her had also unburdened her, because there were lines on her face that were gone. There was a peace about her that hadn't been there before. And I knew her for a few years while I lived there and had many conversations with her. Whatever had left her was truly gone. So that's that story.
This has ended up being a totally interesting conversation in a way that I didn't anticipate. That's a real treat for me. Thanks for, giving me so much to think about.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me to share all of this. I really truly believe there are people listening that need to hear whatever I'm sharing.
I know myself pretty well, and I know that I'm deeply interested in what you've got to say here tonight, because I just feel that kind of wait, I want to. It's funny. I can't really effectively articulate what I actually want to say, and that's rare for me. That's how I know my brain's been put into high gear. I guess my overarching thought that I guess I'll spurt out is it does sound so interesting to me how these religious practices mirror so many New Age or witch practices, or it's in the sense of yeah, I mean, in your case, it's calling to a much higher power, and I do concede that. I don't think that witchcraft and what you're talking about, praying to the Holy Spirit, are analogous. What I mean, though, is just that the underlying understanding of there's an invisible thing that's, doing something to a person that can be cast out or brought in is very real in both scenarios.
Oh, yeah. And I think that, I don't know how I want to say this, but I feel like there's different lenses that we all look through to make sense of the world. And I think in the Pentecostal tradition of the Christian faith, calling out demons as I've just described, okay, that's how it's done there. But I wouldn't be surprised if in other religions or other worldviews, there's different ways to do the same thing. But I believe it's the power of the Holy Spirit that accomplishes it, no matter who's doing it. And again, we're going back to the fight, good for evil over, ownership of one's soul. I find it all fascinating, and it's just what you said, the unseen. I don't know. I find all of that fascinating.
Okay, well, with all of that
heavy
lifting behind us, let's.
You want to hear some fun ghost stories?
That's where I'm going. Absolutely.
So while I was in Key West, I joined a company that does ghost tours, and they're nationwide. They've got 8 locations. It's called Historic Tours of America. They call themselves the Nation Storyteller, and they have trolleys that run during the day in different, tourist destinations and tell the history. And then at night, they have a black trolley called the Trolley of the Doomed. And you dress up in character as a ghost from a certain time period. And while the trolley, drives around and, stops or kind of slows down at certain points of interest, you're telling the ghost story or the history of that point. And it's all very interactive and fun. So I portrayed a character named Letitia Roberts, who had been, I said, a newspaper publisher in the late 1800s, and was about to put out an issue of the newspaper that was going to reveal all the corruption in Key West. But bent over the printing press that night, there was a noise behind me. I turned around too late. Somebody had a rope around my neck. And then I would joke with the people on the trolley and say, all right, I didn't see who did it, but I remember all the stories. And those are the stories I'm going to share with you tonight. And then I'd look at some guy on the trolley and just say, oh my goodness, sir, you look just like him. And then everybody would laugh and I'd say, oh, we got to keep an eye on this guy tonight. So there was that kind of interplay and, some really kind of gnarly ghost stories alongside some really fun banter. But the serious part of the tour was that we left the trolley and we went into a building called the Shipwreck Museum. And it was a rebuilt building on the footprint of what used to be an auction house. And the history in Key West is that in the 1800s, when ships would come near Key West and hit the reef, they'd break apart and they'd sink, and the people spilled out into the ocean would drown. But they would be hanging on to anything floating by to just survive. A lot of people couldn't swim in the 1800s. So there was a wrecking business where people from the town would just get in rowboats, row out to the wreck, and whoever got there first was the person that was in charge of all of the contraband. And all of it would be brought to shore and put in this auction house and auctioned off to pretty much the locals. And it was believed that because a lot of these things brought into the auction house had been like lifesavers or life buoys for drowning people, that the angst and the upset and the fear had transferred itself into these physical items. Well, the auction house, eventually went out of business. The wrecking trade went away and the building was rebuilt. But a lot of those barrels and lifesavers, the things you throw out if somebody's drowning, and artifacts that had been rescued had been touched by those people. So it was believed that this shipwreck museum that people could now tour had a lot of very active paranormal things going on. So when I joined the cast, I didn't think any of that was real. I just thought it was part of the story. And one of the stories that we told when we went in that building was that there had been a suicide on the top of the building and that the person that died now haunted it. Okay, that's another story, right? That's what I'm thinking. And what he was known for was walking up and down the steps while casting his shadow on the wall. But he looked like a daddy long leg spider going by. You just saw arms and legs. You didn't see the body. And I thought, this is just something they're making up to scare the tourists. So I told the story. The tourists were always waiting for something to happen. And one night we saw it. These arms and legs just went up the steps and down the steps. And all the tourists turned to me and they said, "Did you do that?" I said, "I didn't do it. I'm looking at it just like you are." So we were all a little bit freaked out. And that was when I started to think, all right, maybe these are more than stories. So I had to go into that building ahead of the tour, and before I got into costume. So like an hour before the tour started at night, I had to go in that building and unlock one of the doors from the inside so that when we all got off the trolley and approached the door, it was already unlocked. But that night when I walked in, there was all this banging in the building. And I thought somebody was hammering something on the wall. So I walked around a little bit and I called out and I realized I was alone. So I stepped outside and I reminded myself, okay, I'm an intelligent person. I'm educated. I make sense. There's no banging. This is silly. So I walked back inside and the banging had stopped. Okay. So I walked to the door that I had to unlock. And when I reached for it, something physically pushed my arm out of the way. My arm dropped. So I had been told by my castmates that if things ever got freaky inside that building, to talk to whatever was there. So that's what I did. I turned around and I said, all right, I don't know what you are, but you need to go back to your corner. I'm coming back later with the tourists. I'm telling them your stories. Get out of my way. And I left the building. Well, that was the night that that happened. When I came back in with that tourist group and we saw these arms and legs going up and then back down the staircase. And we were all freaked out. So there's just some kind of high level of activity that night. And there were many things like that that happened in that building.
When you say arms and legs, can you describe that a little bit better?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very difficult to explain, but we were in a room that was had very low lighting. And we were all looking at a staircase that went to the 3rd floor, and we're surrounded by artifacts from sunken ships. So it was like a feeling of almost like being inside of a ship. And we're looking at the staircase, and the best way I can describe it is if you've ever been inside your living room and a car goes down the street and the headlights sweep across the wall and you see some movement across the wall as the headlights move past. We saw black sticks almost rapidly go down the wall next to the staircase and back up. And it was almost like if you saw a daddy long leg spider and you only saw the legs and they were illuminated and you're just seeing them large and black go up and down the stairs. It was just like the light passed just enough that we could see it and then it was gone. And that's why I say it was like headlights passing through. And it was very strange. But we referred to this man that committed suicide, not him, but his spirit, as Daddy Longlegs.
So interesting. Especially the part about your hand kind of being pushed out of the way.
Oh, that was freaky. Because, I mean, something physically touched me and moved my arm. So that's where my Christian faith came in, is that, I talked to my pastor about it, and I said, I don't want this stuff going home with me. And he said, you need to protect yourself on the tour. He said, before you go in the building, you need to pray for protection over yourself and protection over your tour group. And then when you leave the building, you need to pray that nothing attached itself to you or to those people. And that's what I did. And, I gave up that job then to work at the Hemingway House as a tour guide there, because I started to feel like maybe I was taking a chance that I didn't need to take, because there were a number of other things that did happen in that building. And I did have some of the tourists take pictures there that they showed me later that clearly showed demons. I mean, not like funny little ghosts. I mean demons. So I just started to think after some time, maybe it's better not to do that.
This fascinating and wide-ranging episode has absolutely been anchored by your presence. I've done a terrible job of hosting the show tonight.
I feel like I'm talking too much.
You've been great. My mind wants to bounce back to ask questions about the Bigfoot again, and I should have done that back when you were telling me. But
the listeners can jump with us. Go for it.
You know what? The listeners will be just fine. Fascinating Fae listeners are honestly a great group of people. Very smart, very sophisticated listeners. I'm sure they'll be with us along this journey. It's not as disjointed as it initially appears. The threads of connection are there. But what I've noticed is we're getting close to that 2-hour mark, and I have a thing I do, which is out of respect for your time and the audience's time. I try to keep the episodes around that 2.5 hour mark. You've given me a lot to think about when it relates to, the suicide heavy episode that it's been, these demonic possessions, your perception of what may or may not have been a Bigfoot in your initial encounter. So let's just circle it all back to the second time. What I wanted to ask you is, you said the leaves were all bedded down, and these saplings were connected at the top. Was it like a woven connection?
Yeah.
Or how?
Yeah, that's what it was. And that's what I was saying to my friend was I couldn't see if it was woven, but I could see they were joined together somehow. And I said to her, something with hands had to do this. This is intelligent design and this is craftsmanship. I was very intrigued by it. And I'm so curious and I just wanted to get a closer look. And that's when, I heard the growl and the hoof, hoof. I mean, it sounded like there was a bull. And it sounded that big, and it was a solid wall of sound. So I really just wanted to see, like why are all these branches put together like that, and why is the grass and the undergrowth all beaten down? I just wanted to see. I was not meant to get any closer. I'm sure that was for my own good.
Huh. It really feels to me, as I listen to you, like it was right there. How high up was the woven stuff? Like, how many feet off the ground?
It was not no more than 4 feet, maybe only 3 feet. I mean, it looked like something you could sit under and, shelter yourself under. But what was interesting about this space, where we were hit by the sound, is it was larger in diameter than the first structure we had seen, but this one was not as thickly woven or put together. It did not have as much coverage from the saplings or the branches or the sticks. You could see through it, whereas the one we had first seen was much thicker. It would have actually protected you if it was raining a little bit. So I'm not really sure what it was about, if it was a nursery of some kind, if it was like a baby Bigfoot, or some youngsters. What's weird is that the woman I was with was my first doula client. I used to be a birth doula, and it could be that there was even a mama Bigfoot, and that was where she was giving birth. And we were about to violate some sacred space.
Absolutely. Birth doula fits that personality that I identified earlier, which is not scared by anything. Totally. I get it. You're absolutely fantastic in that way, because it allows you to tell these stories. And as I listen to you, I just don't detect any embellishment. I'm just like, this is just matter of fact, facts being recounted. Well done.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, okay, so you've been fascinated by Bigfoot, as you mentioned, for a long time. What do you think is going on with not being able to see it?
It didn't want to be seen.
I mean, okay, that's great motivation hypothesis, but beyond that, how?
Okay, so I think that it was in the next dimension, and it didn't step through whatever veil was between us to reveal itself to me.
When I saw that fucking fairy in 2019, it was like two-dimensional. It was flat. It looked like it had punched through reality, is the best way I can describe it. It looked like someone had done a hole punch on a black piece of paper and shone a bright light from behind it, and you could distinctly see everything was emanating from one side of a plane into the space, which was the wheelhouse. So I've seen what I believe is the ingress of a interdimensional entity from one dimension into the other. I think I've seen it happen, is kind of what I think I saw that day.
Yeah, I believe it. I just think that I think that whole park has some interesting aspects to it. I sent you a picture earlier that I took at that park at least 10 years ago. And what's interesting about that picture is I just noticed that the stream was really beautiful that day, and that the light filtering through the trees near the water was just, it's like something out of a fairy tale forest. And I just squatted down by the edge of the stream to take a picture upstream. I'm watching the water come down. I'm seeing the light filter through the trees, and it was just so beautiful. So what's interesting is that about 2 years ago, I bought a second monitor for my computer setup, and it's high definition. And I thought that that particular picture of the stream would be so pretty as a background. Well, that was the first time I saw it 20 inches blown up. And I thought, what are those faces doing there? I saw faces in the rocks. And I shared it with a Bigfoot group on Facebook, and people were seeing faces up in the tree canopy. And I'm thinking, maybe there is such a thing as a fairy. So I'm waiting for your assessment of the picture when you have time to look at it, but I'm just saying there's strange things at that park.
I also have a couple folks that have come on the show that I remain in contact with, for whom I will share that photo, because they are like very, very, it's interesting. Like, it is interesting because I definitely can attest firsthand that I've been shown things. I said, okay, that's what I see. And without like divulging that description, I've shared the photo with others to see what are the other responses, right? And so I'm going to do that again here, and I'll reserve my, I'll reserve not my judgment, but I'll reserve my feedback until I've had a chance to undergo that process.
Okay.
And I'll tell you everything that I learned and what I thought other people, you know, can contribute as well. It's interesting. You know, there's a number of Facebook groups in which photography of the other dimension is a very big part of the group, or is the purpose of the group. And I obviously troll those areas, you know,
of course,
because here's the thing. I've done this show for two years, right? And I have talked to people that have seen amazing things. And I know that there's a small handful, I'm going to say 5 or so of the people I've spoken to, who I would say come pretty close to having seen like what I saw.
Okay.
But I know that what I saw that day back in 2019 was like fucking unreal. It was like one dimension like opening up and crawling into the other right in front of my eyes.
That will change you.
No shit. I guess my point is that fuck, what is my point? I can't believe myself tonight. Usually I'm such a composed host. But truly, I do think the mitigating factor here is your presence, which is you're an unusual guest for me in the sense that you're extremely pragmatic, and the religious underpinning, while still allowing for these things to be taken at face value. You're just a very interesting duality there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me a forum.
One of my biggest fascinations in the show is how do people reconcile and live with these events? And you are a unique perspective on that side of things. Mm-hmm. Why was I trying to talk about? Yes, we're talking about Bigfoot, the interdimensional, you know, entity that Bigfoot may or may not be. Like you're saying, you think it just didn't want to be seen. It hadn't come across from the other dimension. I remember what my question was going to be next and where I was going. So when I saw that fairy in 2019 and it looked sort of two-dimensional and ripping through reality, and as I contemplate you being, you know, more or less face-to-face with an entity that you can't see, and I think about this conversation I had with this gentleman named Tristan, who for a long time went to the fairy realm. Let's just, you know, condense his story to just say it like that. He went there a lot.
Okay.
And he reported back that there are certain key features on the planet that overlap, where what is there on Earth is also there on the fairy realm. Huh. And they're just a vibration apart, but they're fairly identical. And that there are other places that are totally separate, like where we have a mountain, they might have an entire flat city, for example. Okay. But it is more or less the waterways that are the same, and the areas surrounding those waterways. And that, in part, the mechanism of ingress can be understood as how a river or a water source is always there but never the same water. It's an impermanent, permanent thing.
Yep.
And through that paradox is the way in and out of the plains. And so I think it's interesting that the Bigfoot is using saplings that you can see, even though it doesn't want you to see it.
Right.
And I wonder, with all that mumbo jumbo condensed out of my mouth there, if I can wrap it up into a question. So with all that said, like, how do you think that it's working? Do you think it's there full time on Earth, or do you think it's sort of like what I'm talking about? How do you understand it?
Like, why is it using something physical when it could just hide itself?
Bingo. That's exactly what I'm trying to ask.
I think that's a really good question. And I don't have any kind of definitive answer. If I had to guess, it might go back to what we touched on a little bit. What is Bigfoot? Is he interdimensional and flesh and blood? Because if he has to exist in both worlds, then wouldn't he need something physical to protect himself and his offspring in this one?
Well, that makes him just like us, because
Right.
is it not true that our souls are in a way, you know, a type of interdimensional thing? You know what I mean? It's same to me.
I've seen in some of the Facebook groups that I follow the suggestion that those structures could protect or pinpoint some kind of portal.
Well, that in part is kind of why I was giving that little backstory with Tristan, because there's another man I spoke to who I can't get to come on the air, but his story is super interesting too. He's a hiker, and he would hike on the John Muir Trail in California pretty much every summer. He did it like 10 times in 14 summers or something like that. And so he knew the trail very well. And that's a pretty huge hike. That's like one of the top 10 hardest hikes in the world, according to National Geographic. So you need a lot of, you don't go out there unless you're prepared. And part of that is knowing how to orienteer, you know. So this guy's not a joke. And on one particular time, he was going and he was walking, and I get goosebumps every time I tell this story. He was going and he just started to feel like, I don't know where I am. I don't know. I don't recognize this at all. Like, what is this? Like, and he said foliage was different. He said the light was different. He said sound. He said it was earth, but it was not. And he started to become extremely uneasy. So he said, maybe I'm just lost and I'm having a panic attack. So he turned back. And as he started to go back, he's walking, and he's like an experienced navigator. So he, on his way there, had noted landmarks constantly as he was walking. And as he's starting to go back, he knows he's on the same exact trail. That's for sure. He hasn't gotten off the trail. And now he's going back, and he does not recognize anything that he is passing on his way back. And now his panic is increasing tenfold. And he goes on to explain in detail that he found himself trapped in the fairy realm. And it wasn't until he returned to a specific point on the trail that he was able to visually see where the break was and able to get back onto the other side. And that's his story. And I mean, he describes it like he was just walking. Everything was normal. He didn't do anything special. He wasn't out for a meditation or an attempt to go to the fairy realm. Do you understand? He was just walking for his hike. And he just found himself in that other place. And it very much suggests, when I listen to Tristan and I listen to this guy, that you may very well be right there, that perhaps it's protecting a type of weak spot in between the two planes. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I think it'll be interesting when you look at the photo I sent you. Somebody else that looked at it said there were two portals between some trees right past the stream in the picture. So maybe this farm is someplace, this park is someplace where there are portals. And now people are walking through the woods all the time. I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks that Bigfoot is a protector. So if this is some kind of special spiritual place, and Bigfoot is there, that might be his purpose.
What a wide-ranging and absolutely fascinating conversation we've had here tonight, Katrina. I want to say it's been fun, but I feel like that's not the right word.
It's been intriguing.
I enjoy a good mind scratch.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
It's a unique conversation to go into the catalog, and I'm extremely proud to have created this, work of art here with you tonight, because it's super, super full of both of our personalities wrestling with this subject matter.
Right. We just don't know.
Well, when you stop and you really break it down, right, how a person understands the paranormal is equally as fascinating, if not more fascinating, than the encounters and experiences themselves.
Right.
So the show Fascinating Fae, low-key, is mostly actually about how people are walking in their skin as they deal with these things, as it is what happened to them.
Right.
And the latter may be the more interesting one in a lot of cases, because matters of faith, matters of navigating life are extremely nuanced, and there is, in my opinion, no right answer. I like that you've got some confidence that there is a right answer for you, and I really admire that. For me, I was never able to find the satisfaction in a religious practice, and I still don't even find the satisfaction in what I'm doing here now. I'm just constantly asking questions and confusing myself.
That's part of the fun.
Well, I can't be disingenuous and pretend I understand it well enough to give it any real authority. So it is what it is for the time being, which is just an aggregation of conversations that produces trends that can start to form hypotheses, and we'll take it from there. Right.
Yeah. And that's what brings us comfort when we have these unusual experiences and we learn that other people have, and we see some commonalities. It helps us say, oh, okay, well, I'm not so strange then after all.
One of the most comforting things is the commonality of experience and the disparity of the people. Everyone is so different, but the stuff is the same. And that's what's truly comforting, because if it was isolated to one kind of person, then you could say, that's just a byproduct of a lifestyle that everyone's living, but that's not true. You don't have to be any kind of way to begin with for this stuff to unfold in your life. That's why I think, to go back to DK and others, Clyde, I carry on because I know that for sure, for a lot of people listening, holding the space that I do for the show to exist like it does, without judgment and with allowing it to get strange and weird and contemporary, not isolating folklore as the reason, not, in your case, the ghost story I think is related to a past event, but I think that, some stuff is just very contemporary, at the same time. So allowing the show to be what it is and allowing guests like yourself to come forward is therapy, like you mentioned, for both of us and for everybody listening. And to try to contain it in any other kind of container than just allowing people to be themselves and be honest that, hey, this isn't always easy to understand, and I don't really know anything about it exactly, but this is what I think and feel, I hope is a good service. I don't know if it makes for a good podcast or not. I think it's just the only way that I can do it, at the end of the day. So,
well, thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Truly one for the books. Well, you've listened to a few episodes, and so you may know this one's coming. I ask all of the guests that come on the show the same question, and I'll ask it to you now, if it's okay with you. Okay, well, Katrina, not that not that any of us know, but what do you think that fairies are?
I think they're just part of another dimension, another realm, and sometimes they pop through and wink at us. I think they're always there. We just don't always see them.
That's why I think Bigfoot's a fairy.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty close MO.
If I were you, I might not call him a fairy to his face.
You know what? The big guy can come on down here to Costa Rica, and
That's right.
I can share some mangoes with him and see if he'll.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what? One of the things about the show is like, yeah, how do straight white dudes talk about fairies? This is what it looks like. In my case, anyway.
Yeah.
And I get that joke like so often on Reddit, and I say, "Oh, there's the loser." You know what I mean? When I say like, I often ask. Sorry, I'm butchering my own delivery there. I often ask on like Reddit, "Hey, have you seen a fairy?" And then someone will say like, "Oh yeah, I was down in like San Francisco last week. I saw a ton of them." You know, it's like, okay, thank you very much. You know.
Well, you know what's funny is I have a daughter who's 26 now, but when she was little, there was just something about her. She loved playing in the woods, and she was always playing around the base of trees and making mud pies and making little designs with leaves and rocks and sticks. And I said to her, totally serious one day, I said, when you're playing in the woods, with the trees and everything, do you ever see the little folk? Do you ever see the fairies? And she just looked at me for the longest time and didn't say anything. She never answered me. I think she was seeing something and was just looking at me like, are you really that dumb? Like, that was the look she was giving me, like, are you serious, Mom? She never answered me.
Yeah, like asking you, like, when you're playing, do you see the rocks? Mom, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
She's a very, very old soul. She's been around many times. I'm convinced she was born knowing a lot more than I ever will. Like, it was all there in her eyes the first time I held her. I'm like, whoa, this is a deep one I've birthed. And her brother's completely different. I think he's a completely new soul. I think everything is just awe-inspiring and a wonderment to him. I think he's never experienced any of this before. They're completely different. He's a little more open to some of this stuff. I shared with him what happened to me last weekend, and he just, he takes it under advisement. He's not for it or against it. He's very neutral.
As you did a nice, like, totally unrelated segue into your children there, I think I figured it out, what was melting in my brain the entire time tonight. I really like a lot of what you think, and I think it's melting my brain that I think similarly at all to a Pentecostal religious person. So that's so interesting to me, because I think we actually really understand one another, and
Right.
I'm going to look a little bit more into Pentecostal Christianity when we're done talking.
Just go. You have to have the experience. It's like trying to convince somebody of fairies or Bigfoots just by telling them. You have to go have the experience. Show up at a church. Go with an open mind. See what happens.
I've made the joke a number of times, and you'll encounter it on the show as you continue to listen, that Jesus sounds like one hell of a fairy. He's an invisible person that you make wishes to, and you better
Right.
behave, because he's going to judge what you're doing, and there's a bunch of rules, and don't make deals, and
Yeah. He's an interesting figure. I grew up in the 70s, and going to Sunday school, they had, when they told the Bible stories, the Sunday school teachers had these felt boards. It was like felt fabric over an easel, and they had little cutout figures of Jesus and Samson and Delilah and the apostles and Mary and Joseph, and they would stick them on there with Velcro while they were telling the story. Anybody listening who went to Sunday school in the 70s knows exactly what I'm talking about with the felt board. But for me, the Jesus I could identify with was the one that flipped the tables in the temple. Like, I got the Jesus that had that righteous anger, who was like, yeah, I'm not putting up with money changers in the temple. And he just started flipping tables. And I'm like, yeah, go Jesus, badass Jesus. Like, that was the Jesus I got. Turning the other cheek, being so nice. I'm like, what, really? So I have always been fascinated by stories of Jesus because, I mean, he was a teacher. He was a man who lived flesh and blood, right? But was without sin. But he had this, the spiritual nature that he's the son of God. So he was fully man, but he was fully spiritual. So I've always been fascinated by Jesus.
One thing I believe that you and I can both agree on is it's never not been biblical times. That epic struggle for good and evil is ongoing.
Right, right.
And until the great resolve, here we
Yep.
find ourselves. So,
right. And we're still trying to figure it out. They've been trying to figure it out since Jesus' day. That's why we're talking about it. We're sharing our experiences with each other.
we started here at the top and we'll end here, which is I like how two different people like you and I can come together and have this conversation. I think that's a huge accomplishment, honestly.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I've been totally stimulated. My thinking is changed. And that's why I do this show. So the thanks flows from this side of the mic to you. You've been a great guest tonight. Honestly, I mean that.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Same. Okay, well, with that momentum, let's do this. I spend 1 minute signing off, doing housekeeping at the end of each show, and then I give my guests the last word. So if it's cool with you, I'll do my housekeeping, and then you can share your last thoughts as we go to sign off here tonight.
Sounds good.
Okay, awesome. Well, tonight you've been listening to Fascinating Fae. I'm your host, Jim. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, if you've got some diverse perspectives like tonight and you'd like to be on the show, please shoot me an email. You can do that at encounters@fascinatingfae.com. And you can also find the show on any social media by looking for it at Fascinating Fae. You can send me a DM on Facebook, Instagram, if you want to get in contact with me that way, if that's more comfortable for you than an email, for example. And I don't ever mention it, but I'm on Reddit quite a bit, so you can find the show there. I do quite a lot of posting, and there's actually tons of interesting responses that don't make it into the show to some of the posts I put out looking for submissions. So I've never mentioned that before, totally neglect to do so, and I thought I'd mention it here tonight. You can find the show on Reddit. With all that said, I will say that on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners tuning in to Fascinating Fae tonight, a super big thanks to Katrina for coming on the show. Katrina, thank you so much for being here. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate being able just to talk so freely and examine so many ideas and experiences. This has been a wonderful experience for me.
Truly, one for the books. I really mean that. Likewise, right back at you. Very, very stimulating and engaging conversation. Well, with all those good feelings behind us, let's let you have your last words, please.
My last words are thank you for allowing me to share so many cool experiences, and that's what I would encourage everybody listening to do. Whatever experience you've had, I don't think it takes that much bravery to talk about it. I think just talk about it because it happened, and maybe you'll find other people that needed to hear that.
Hey, it's been a quarter century, and there's no use fighting just what way the mind goes. Today, I surrender gently, and the answer all along was under my nose. To say, to smell the earth right after rain. I'm still looking for some things that I can't find. Today I fought a battle in my brain, and I'm rattling the cage that is my mind. Over hills and through the fiery peaks of love, to a heart so cold it could freeze. Through the woods I walked, a hurricane above, till I could finally see the forest for the trees. Hey, oh, tonight I lay awake, and my meandering mind is on a playground. Today, in creation I embrace all the geniuses in time and all that they found. To say, smell the earth right after rain. I'm still looking for some things that I can't find. Today I fought a battle in my brain, and I'm rattling the cage that is my mind. Over hills and through the fiery peaks of love, a heart so cold it could freeze. Through the wilderness, a hurricane above, till I could finally see the forest for the trees.
Well, you know what's funny is I have a daughter who's 26 now, but when she was little, there was just something about her. She loved playing in the woods, and she was always playing around the base of trees and, making mud pies and making, little, designs with leaves and rocks and sticks. And I said to her, totally serious one day, I said, when you're playing in the woods, with the trees and everything, do you ever see the little folk? Do you ever see the fairies? Fairies. Well, I've been dreaming of a land, a world at one with what is what, where I can understand, and you would lead me by the hand, take me to a garden found where flowers bloom all year round, and I do believe it's there. Yeah, I do believe it's there. The angels singing by the shore, and people play right through the day, just like we did before. And
and they have never gone to war. Never stood on a battlefield or held a heavy sword or shield, and I do believe it's there. Yeah, I do believe it's there. If we believe, then we can soar to the land where people stand with 2 feet on the floor. Well, they have never gone to war, never stood on a battlefield or held a heavy sword or shield, and I do believe it's there. Yeah, I do believe it's there. And I do believe it's there. Yeah, I do believe it's there.